Welcome to Key Tech. Please describe this channel if you are interested in today's video. The most prosperous time of TSMC is to have two customers, Apple and Huawei. In 2019, Apple contributed 23% of TSMC's revenue and Huawei 14%. The two are TSMC's first and second largest customers respectively. However, in order to prevent TSMC from making OEMs for Huawei, the United States revised the relevant rules 3 times in a row, resulting in TSMC eventually losing Huawei, its second largest customer. TSMC has been restricted since then, and now it is impossible to turn back. TSMC has been benevolent to Huawei before, and of course it does not want to lose this big customer, so as to cause even greater losses. Previously, the U.S. restriction required that U.S. technology accounted for more than 25%, and TSMC directly stated that it was less than 25%. Later, the United States adjusted the proportion of American technology to 10%. TSMC stated that the proportion of American technology in the 5 nanometers process was less than 10% and continued to manufacture Kirin chips for Huawei. Therefore, the United States directly requested that any American technology be used. Even so, TSMC also took advantage of the buffer period to actively coordinate production capacity and produce as many chips as possible for Huawei. After that, although Huawei's vacated production capacity was filled, TSMC no longer had a large customer like Huawei with a share of more than 10%. And TSMC has begun to rely more on American companies, especially Apple's share continues to increase, becoming a dominant player. TSMC has not only lost its bargaining power in front of Apple, but even the establishment of factories in the United States has been affected to a certain extent. After all, Apple is a U.S. company. Under the situation that the U.S. is actively promoting local chip manufacturing, even as a chip user, it will contribute. Apple stated that it does not want to rely too much on Asian production capacity. In order to reduce risks, it will implement diversification of chip manufacturing sources. The meaning of this is clear enough, so TSMC later decided to build a 3 nanometers factory on the basis of the 5 nanometers factory built in the United States. Cook not only participated in the TSMC US factory ceremony, but also excitedly expressed that he would use US-made chips. However, things are getting worse for TSMC. The factory has been built, a lot of funds have been invested, and talents have been chartered to send there, but the chip subsidy has not been in place and Buffett has withdrawn 80% of the stocks. Recently, the US media has exposed the serious problems facing TSMC, such as high costs and great pressure on employees and suppliers. What TSMC did not expect was that the cost of chip manufacturing in the United States was not only 50% higher, but even the cost of building a factory was at least 4 times higher than that of Taiwan, China. There are also related suppliers who have followed the factory construction in the past, saying that the cost has risen too much, and they can only increase the price. Therefore, it is reported that TSMC has made 2 decisions. One is to postpone the European plant construction plan for 2 years, and the other is to increase the 28 nanometers mature process of the Nanjing plant. Therefore, some analysts believe that TSMC has begun to turn around and will shrink the construction of factories in Europe and the United States. However, everyone may be thinking too simply. How could TSMC turn back so easily? Now it is involuntary. First of all, a lot of money has been invested in the United States. Building a fab is very costly. TSMC's previous investment in the US factory was $12 billion US. Later, it was necessary to build another factory and increase the capital to $40 billion US. Even this is not enough. TSMC has already invested such a large sum of money, how can it turn back when it wants to? So it makes a third decision. TSMC's board of directors recently decided to increase capital by another $3.5 billion to the US factory. However, TSMC's requirement for approving capital injection is no more than $3.5 billion. It can be seen how reluctant TSMC is, but it has to continue to increase capital in the US chip factory. Second, access to subsidies has to follow the rules. If TSMC wants to get subsidies for building a factory in the United States, it has to follow other people's rules, and it will not get new or expanded fabs in mainland China in the next 10 years. What's more, TSMC's mainland factory only has a 1-year exemption period. Furthermore, the mature process layout is not dominant. Based on the above reasons, even if TSMC wants to turn around, it cannot develop in the mainland market and can only maintain the original Nanjing factory. Although the Nanjing plant has decided to expand production, it is no longer dominant. Because SMIC has already laid out its layout for a long time, investing in the expansion of 28 nanometers mature process fabs 4 times in a row. Judging from the above 3 decisions, even if TSMC wants to turn back, it can't turn back. Now it can only bite the bullet and go on building a factory in the United States. This is why Morris Chang said that it is better for the United States to invest in TSMC to build a chip industry. After the revision of the chip rules, TSMC is in a very awkward position. In the words of Morris Chang, TSMC is at the center of geopolitics, which makes TSMC have to walk on thin ice. As a result, TSMC still made a decision. First, it invested $12 billion to build 5 nanometers chips, and then increased the investment to $40 billion and built a new 3 nanometers chip production line. According to the information released by TSMC, after the 5 nanometers chip production line is built, it will be directly used to produce 4 nanometers chips, and it is planned to produce 3 nanometers chips in the United States in 2026. After building a factory in the United States, TSMC will lose its cost and supply chain advantages, and the result can be imagined. In fact, the cost of building a factory in the United States is indeed high. TSMC plans to invest $12 billion in the construction of a 5 nanometers chip production line in the United States. During the construction process, it found that $12 billion was not enough and had to invest an additional $3.5 billion. Secondly, TSMC has always refused to build a factory in the United States. Even if the United States offered to build a factory, TSMC also refused. However, after TSMC was unable to ship freely, it announced investment in the construction of a 5 nanometers chip production line in the United States. Today, even Apple, the largest customer, has cut orders for 120,000 pieces, and Intel has to postpone 3 nanometers orders. TSMC can only continue to fight for US companies. In this regard, foreign media said that it is too late for TSMC to turn around and it is too late to regret it.